Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Rob, and about 2 to 2.5 years ago, my father and I made one of the bigger financial purchases in our company's history, and that is with this guy right behind me, which is the Cefla Prima P. It's a flatline spray booth, and uh, throughout the past couple of years of owning it, I've had a lot of people reach out to me with questions. And so I thought that it'd be good for me to make this video just to provide an end user experience over the last couple years. So that way, if there's some of you out there that are kind of looking into maybe going down this route, I can share some of my experiences, good or bad, and that way it'll kind of help you out on your decision. I noticed that there are a few questions that kept popping up, and so that's I want to address those questions because I feel like that's just a question that a lot of people have. When if they were like me and I had never, before we ended up getting one of these, I didn't really know much about flatline spraying, so I was kind of going into it new, so to speak. But uh, since we've got this, I feel like flatline spray booths. There's a lot of interest that is being generated around this system, and it's become more accessible to smaller shops. And so I think there's going to be a lot more interest in the future. And so hopefully I can kind of provide some insight. I'm a Cefla fan. I've got the hat on. And we've got the spray booth behind me. I've got the Unidry dryer right over here to my side. But this is going to be just an unbiased review, or it's not even a review. This is just my thoughts on the spray system. Cefla has no involvement in this video. They're not sponsoring me. It is on my own volition. And so, this is not going to be a review of Cefla product itself. Just more, what the flatline system has been in my experience. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first question, which is the one that I get asked the most. And that is going to be, how efficient is a flatline spray booth like this compared to the old traditional way of spraying, which is by hand, or how we used to spray by hand. And there's different ways of manual spraying, but we did the traditional, just, by hand. And when I started to try to answer this, I realized that when you're comparing efficiency, you really cannot compare, like it's an apples to oranges comparison. And I'm going to try hard to do my best to explain this in a way that makes sense. When you're doing things by hand, first you have to have an experienced sprayer if you want to maximize your efficiency. And your volume and time, like you're going to have a lower volume of materials, and then it's more time it takes to complete a process. And I'm saying that because I'm trying to establish why it's hard to compare the two. To put it into perspective, before we made the jump to a flatline spray system, I would say, just for the sake of simplicity, on average we were doing, let's say we were painting about 2 full kitchens a week. And that is complete painting, doors, you've got to flip parts, all the parts. In those 2 weeks, let's say we use 25 gallons or so per kitchen, you're using about 50 gallons of paint a week. And, it's easy to kind of see, once you've got the kitchens done, how much paint is left over, from the paint you bought for that job, how much is left over. And then you can kind of do the math and figure out like what your, how efficient you are in terms of like, buying the amount of paint you need and then spraying it. When you move to a flatline system, it is fundamentally different, I feel like, in terms of like material usage. Because when you take that 2 kitchens a week, we moved to the flatline spray unit, and we were doing about 2 kitchens a day, like pretty easily 2 kitchens a day. So we're doing one day in one day what we used to do in 1 week. And then if you spread that out over a week, let's say we're doing about 10 full kitchens of painting a week at 50 gallons a day. You're going into the hundreds of gallons of paint at that point. And if you take a raw comparison, you're going to notice that there's more paint outside of the parts than there are if you do it by hand. So you could come to the conclusion that you're wasting more uh, paint than you would be by hand. However, your volume of parts going through the machine is scales to such a degree that it no longer, in my mind, becomes like how much paint am I losing, because it is important to be efficient with your paint loss. You want to be efficient, but it becomes how fast am I getting parts through to where I can bill out the customer. So if you take those two kitchens a week, let's just say they were $10,000 kitchens for easy math. That's $20,000 a week at 50 gallons a week, versus at now I can bill out $100,000 a week, and I might use 500 gallons. But you're looking at it as a time, like how fast am I getting completed units out, and I find myself not even really worrying so much about how much paint I'm using, because you have longer lines. You have more of a system to run paint through, so you're going to lose a little bit more, but you're going to find that you're going to be more worried about how fast you're getting parts out than how much paint is you're wasting. Because once you'll get it set up and you'll find a happy medium, and you'll be like, hey, I'm getting the most amount of paint out on the parts as I can for how fast I'm going through it, and I'm okay with how it's set up because I'm getting X amount of product out consistently the other side of the machine. So I hope that makes sense, and my goal is to kind of I guess kind of steer people away from the notion of like how efficient is it when they're going into this decision of like, do I want to implement it? Because the reality is you're going to see your paint bill skyrocket. I mean, we went from ordering 50 to 100 gallons a week to hundreds of gallons at a time, and I use about 400 or 500 gallons a week. And so we might even be up in the thousands of gallons. I don't even know at this point. But what I do know is that the products coming out of the machine, I know what that is. So I know that paint is going on the parts, and I know what I can bill out. And that's kind of like, it's hard when you have no frame of reference. Like 2.5 years ago, before we had this, you have no real frame of reference for all this, and so it's just something that you kind of have to experience. But the efficiency lost is gained in time, like time and through output. And so it's just a kind of a different way of having to think about the term efficiency. So I hope that answers that question. If not, and I need to clarify that a little bit more, please let me know. I'm always happy to tell you kind of like what I think about something. Next question that I normally get asked after is it efficient, is the cost of how much does it cost? And unfortunately, cost is going to be a big factor in a machine like this. I mean, it's quite significant, and when you look at it on paper, it can maybe make your head a little dizzy, especially if you were a smaller shop like we were. And so I have gotten asked many times, like, were you guys nervous, or were you scared when you bought this? And I can tell you hands down, my mother was terrified because she does our books, and she was very scared. My dad, I'm sure, was really nervous, because he was the one who ultimately signed the paper. But I had confidence after meeting with the Cefla team that they were going to deliver, on their product, and they were very reassuring. Like they reassured me over and over. Like, you are going to be very happy that you did this. Like, you don't know now, it's scary. There's going to be this time between when you buy the machine and money's leaving your account before it gets installed, and you're going to have all this time to think about like what's happening, and you can get in your head a little bit. But bringing that to now, 2.5 years later, I cannot imagine a world in which I did not have this in our paint line. I would probably confidently say that if something happened and we had to get rid of these machines, I would probably exit painting altogether. Like we have adapted to this system to such a degree that I don't think I would be willing to go back and do it by hand. Um, so in terms of the cost, kind of going back to that efficiency, like we, it is an enormous cost, but when you see all the parts coming out and you say, hey, we're doing 10 times the volume, well, then what you're able to bill scales with the machine. So you'll notice that, as long as you've got good business coming in, and you're able to get the products out, get them built, get them into the houses or wherever they go, and you're able to bill, you will see that will scale with your production. So it was a little bit of a faith moment. We had to have faith, but now 2.5 years later, we're not worried anymore because our business has scaled. Like, and you'll find that the more that you can do, the more people want to use you. So our business has scaled with the machine to where we were able to offset what that cost. And it's over time. You can calculate it. You're not gonna. It varies. I've heard stories of people paying these things off really fast, especially like in the aerospace and stuff like that. But if you're a small cabinet shop and you're looking at that cost, at least in my experience, it has worked out well for us. Even though it was a very large cost up front, it has allowed us to get a whole lot more product out the door in the same amount of time than we were using before. So that's kind of my thoughts on the cost aspect of it. Another question that I get asked is space, and these are bigger machines. You can see behind me there's a lot going on. You've got your pumps, you've got the machines, the ventilation system. So, space can definitely be a limiting factor. You would really want to make sure you have adequate space if you were going to try to put something like this in. We're kind of limited on space here, so after we bought this, it was like 1.5 years or so, we bought the oven, which is off to my right. We didn't have room to put them in line with each other because ultimately that's ideal. So we had to put the oven off to the side, and we have to actually move the parts to the oven by hand. But that's just an example of like a space constraint that we were kind of forced to work around. So that is just something to keep in mind. You're going to have the space to put it. I don't have the numbers for this. I think it's like 21 feet long by 18 wide. It's like the actual footprint. But, any flatline that I feel like you go with, that's going to be a consideration as the space. Another thing that like I want to kind of prepare someone for, like if they were going to, just do this and they say they were used to doing something by hand, the cost of maintenance, of ownership of this thing, like you're going to see your materials, not just the paint. Like your paint's going to increase, but like you've got upkeep. You are scaling up from a by hand style of painting where you've got some pumps and this, that to maintain. Now you are scaling up quite a bit. So you're going to see the prices of materials go way, way up, and you're going to have expenses that you're going to have to factor in. For example, my machine, we've got to buy rolls of paper, you've got filters, you've got all these things that you're going to be changing out on a regular basis. And so those costs have to be absorbed. And so, that's just something to keep in mind. So that way, that those costs are coming along with the ownership. So this is, if you think about it, we are getting to the point where you're almost like a production line where you have just reoccurring weekly costs of everything. And so it's all part of the game. You scale up more, more stuff equals more problems, more things to spend money on. And it's the reality of what you have to do to get to more of a production line setup. So that's just something to be aware of, when it does, if you do decide to kind of pull the trigger on something like this. Another big component that I feel like with the flatline is going to be the teachability. I think that is huge. This is one of the more simple machines that we have in our operation. So it takes very, I don't want to say, you don't have to do a whole lot to run it. Let's just say that. So you don't have to worry if someone's skilled at spraying or anything like that. It's very simple to start, very simple to use. You need about 3 or 4 guys if you're going and blowing. Um, but it's very simple to run. So the teachability is great, and the user friendliness is great. Um, so I think that's at least for this Cefla machine, but I imagine other flatlines probably run in a similar vein. They're simple to use. So to kind of wrap this up into like a conclusion, I guess my experience overall has been very positive. But that being said, like we invested into Cefla, when we did put this in. I'm sure there's a lot of other really good brands out there. I just don't have experience with them. So my advice, though, whatever you do, would probably be to buy once, cry once. Have that buy once, cry once mentality, so that way you do know that what you're getting is going to be a good product. Because the last thing you want to do is spend a lot of money fighting stuff when you could spend just a little bit more money, have a better product all the way around. So just keep that in mind. That's kind of my 2 cents on this whole flatline system. So again, hopefully this provides some insight. I know that there's a whole lot I didn't cover. I'm trying not to get into too many details on things because I don't want to drag this out. So it's kind of more of a broad strokes look at the last 2 years of owning it. Would I do it again? Absolutely. For me, I would do it again. But if any of you have experiences with different products or have anything you'd like to add, please add. And I think it's good for the more information that we can spread, the better off we all are. So thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a good morning, noon, or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next video.